Hi, welcome to Yoga Selection. My name is Rod. Today's class we're focusing on chair back bends. We'll also be including some shoulder opening variations. Make sure that you've got a yoga chair. Make sure that you've got at least one blanket. Taller people, potentially you may need extra blankets. Shorter stature, potentially you may need some height for your heels when we get to the chair back bends. Make sure that you've also got two blocks nearby. And we'll start off in Aramukha Virasana. So, as always, the assumption that you've already been lying back, Supta Baddha Konasana or Supta Virasana, and at this point you're ready to begin with your active sequence. Big toes together, knees apart, keeping your hips anchored, the hands walk forwards, and then the hands press down. As we've been working the last couple of weeks, as the hands press down, initially in the pose, that bit of a stretching action as if we're stretching the mat away from the knees. So pressing down with the hands and as if pulling the mat in the direction away from the knees. And we can feel the effect there. The hips, they stay back more and they press down more. And building on that, the thigh bones, choose the bit right up near the pelvis. The thigh bones, let them descend, release back into the body. The shin bones, the region of the shin bone nearer the ankle joint, making a firmer contact with the floor. At this stage, as the pose starts to evolve and settle, the spine quite naturally starts to find more length away from the pelvis. Don't prevent that from happening. And then just the last few moments there, let's check it in again with the hands. Probably at this point, not so much that action of stretching the mat away, but more of an even, balanced downward pressure with the hands, making sure that the inner fingers are pressing to the floor. Okay, release and come up. Let's do Uttanasana. Make sure that you're able to easily get a flat contact with the palms of your hands down to the floor. If you can't do that without blocks, then take some blocks. It doesn't matter what height. You can work with flat blocks if need be, tall blocks if need be. And let's ensure that the heels of the hands can clearly come flat to the floor. So now that we've established whether or not we need the blocks, let's just have them there within reach, but put them off to the side and just come to Uttanasana with the hands to the floor or the shins, the neck releasing and the head hanging. Firm pressure with the big toe bases down. Even lift through the knees, so the inner knee, the outer knee lifting up. The whole of the front thigh lifting up towards the pelvis. The legs supporting the weight of the body, and there's more of a letting go action in the torso. The more we release the back waist area, the more length we get from the pubic bone to the navel. The more we contain the upper back, that region near to where the shoulder blades are, the more the sternum bone can release downwards towards the floor. Neck release, head hang, but without dropping your shoulders. Keep your shoulders lifting and spreading. Okay, so from this more passive version of Uttanasana, let's now bring the blocks back at whatever height you need to get your palms flat. But then, rather than having the fingers as we would normally have them facing forwards, let's rotate the hands so that the fingers are now turned back. And just looking to the screen if you're not sure there. Fingers pointing back in the direction of the feet. The heels of the hands, you can easily see them, make sure that they're evenly facing forwards. Commonly the little finger side there, the little finger side of the wrist drags back. So whilst pressing the heels of the hands down, turn the little finger side of the wrist forwards and away from the feet. It sets up a rotation, not just in the wrist region, but where the biceps are in the upper arm, the biceps are turning outwards. So the inner biceps on the little finger side of the arm, the inner biceps, it's lengthening downwards and turning forwards. The outer biceps, it's on the thumb side of the arm, it's turning back towards the wall behind and lifting up as it turns back. Those of you that are prone to hyperextending the elbows, just ensure that you're not hitting the elbow joint forwards. Keep the triceps muscle firm, contained, and the shoulder sockets, draw them back into the body. Maintain that action, keeping the shoulder sockets contained as the chest moves forwards. So a more concave spine version of Uttanasana here, lifting your head, looking across the room, moving your chest forwards and away from the pelvis. Okay, and then release. And let's bring the hands back and we'll go to Aramukha Virasana. We'll do a shoulder-related variation of it using the blocks. So we need to make sure that we've got the mat right up against the wall. We'll then wedge the blocks on a 45-degree angle against the wall. So we've got the long edge of the block in contact with the floor, and the distance in between the blocks there ensures that the hands can be turned out like this with the wrist shoulder width, and ideally with the whole length of the fingers on the block. We want to avoid the fingers curling around the ends of the block. If we do that, we're not going to get quite the same effect into the shoulders. So coming into position, check that your hands fit completely onto the blocks. Make sure that your blocks are securely wedged. Make sure that the heels of the hands are level, parallel with the inner edges of the blocks. Fingers spreading as wide apart as possible. For me, that means that the little finger and index finger just a little bit overlap off the edge of the block. Keep the thumbs lifting towards the wall and then pressing back to dog pose. So ensure that the wrist is shoulder width, the arms will be parallel with one another here. Bring your attention to your hands. Notice if the weight is collapsing towards the heel of the hand, redirect it towards the index finger bases. Squeeze them into the blocks. As you do that, the thumb side of the wrist contain a little towards the center line of the pose. Now we can work from the elbow, making sure that the elbows are straight and lifting, but today, rather than going directly to the elbow, go more to the triceps muscle and work to grip it and firm it in towards the arm bones. Choose the bit that's nearer the shoulder, not the bit that's nearer the elbow joint. That gives you access to the deltoid muscles, those round muscles that sit on the outsides of the shoulders when we're in a standing position. Draw those deltoid muscles into the body, the muscle fiber away from the skin, so that we can generate lift up through the shoulder region, on the front of the body where the armpit chest is, on the back of the body where the shoulder blades are, lifting up through the sides of the ribs, through the sides of the waist, all the way to the pelvis. Okay, and then release down, knees to the floor, hips back to heels, the blocks can go off to the side, arms extend forwards. So we'll be working with some shoulder opening variations. We'll be taking them into the back bends themselves. We'll also be working with some preparatory standing poses that will lead us towards back bends but also help that shoulder opening. So a version of dog pose that will lead towards pincha mayurasana. Let's keep our knees down to the floor. Bring the elbows to the floor, so your elbows are bent, and then you're bringing your hands to the wall with the heel of the hand in contact with that last bit of the wall before it meets the floor. Now if you can't get that from the verbal description there, and just looking to the screen. So you've got the palms of the hands to the wall, fingers spreading, and then you're sliding your hands down the wall as far as possible so that the thumb side of the wrist, here we'll refer to it as the inner wrist can press down onto the floor. So you've got your wrist shoulder width, the inner wrist pressing down. Notice when you do that, the tendency for the elbows to get light, even lift a little and widen out towards the sides of the mat. Instead, roll the inner wrists down, but contain the elbows. I feel the bone there slide a bit on the arm skin towards the center line of the mat, and it generates lift to where the collarbones are. They lift up and away from the floor. Pressing the hands into the wall, resist your shoulder sockets away from the wall, tuck your toes under, and then straighten your legs and raise up. Keep your heels lifting here as opposed to dog pose where we would be descending the heels. Index finger bases squeeze into the wall, inner wrists roll down to the floor. Contain the elbows towards the center of the mat. Where the upper arm bone joins the shoulder, resist away from the wall. Collarbones lifting up and away from the floor. Okay, and then bend your knees down and return your hips back to your heels. Okay, let's work in a similar way, but now using a block. And just to be clear of how we're positioning the hands on the block, and we do it in several different ways in specific yoga poses, but we've got the palms of the hands either edge of the block, and the long edge of the block will be aligning with the heel of the hand. That region where the heel of the hand joins the wrist bones, and we can fan the fingers apart. Place the block up towards the end of the mat, furthest away from the wall. Have your elbows to the floor. Now, using a belt today as a last resort, preferably challenging yourself and working with that tendency for the elbows to splay out. We're going to start with the feet to the floor. We'll eventually then begin to walk our feet up the wall, and eventually we'll be kicking up into the pincha mayurasana position. First of all, the position of the hands. Place them against the edges of the block, the side edges of the block, fingers spreading. Notice the outer wrist here, the little finger side, the outer wrist, it tends to lift off the floor. As we press them down, notice how the block just a little bit moves away from you. So outer wrists press down, index finger bases squeeze into the block. Tuck your toes under, and then we'll be straightening the legs, lifting your hips up. Again, the index finger bases squeeze into the blocks. The outer wrists press down to the floor. You'll feel the block just a little bit move away from the elbows as you do that. Notice the tendency for the elbows to splay out. Often we use a belt to correct that, but for today, press against the block with the hands and squeeze the elbows that little bit closer towards the center of the mat, where the upper arm bones join the shoulders, back into the body, towards the wall behind, and your collarbones lifting. Okay, and then release your knees down to the floor and return your hips back to your heels. So building as we go, this next one will be stepping up the wall. So we need to make sure that our starting point has our elbows a leg's length distance away from the wall. We can measure that. Soles of the feet to the wall, taking note of where our hips are, turning to face away from the wall, placing our elbows in the section of the mat where the hips have just been, same hand position on the side edges of the block. Fingers spreading, outer wrists pressed down, index finger bases squeezing firmly into the blocks. Raise up your hips, step up the wall, 1 foot at a time so that the legs are parallel to the floor. Have the feet hip width apart. Index finger bases squeeze into the block, outer wrists press down. Contain your elbows towards the center of the mat, where the upper arm bones join the shoulders into the body, towards the wall where your feet are.
collarbones lifting, pelvis lifting, thigh bones lifting. And then release down, hips back to heels, arms extend forwards. Okay, let's now work with the full pose. So we'll bring the block to the wall. Now we're going to have that same hand position. We need to allow enough room for the fingers. So for me, the block needs to be a little bit back from the wall so that when the hands are in that position, the fingertips are just very lightly touching the wall. Knowing that at that point where we kick up into the pose, invariably the hands will just a little bit move in that direction. So we don't want the fingertips to be uncomfortably jammed into the wall here. Check that your elbows are shoulder width. Now, if you were unable to prevent your elbows from splaying out in that last version of the pose where we stepped up the wall, it may be necessary at this point to place a belt around your elbows just to ensure that your elbows are not going to give on you when you kick up into the pose. So pressing your hands against the side edges of the block, emphasize the index finger bases, squeeze them into the block. Without losing that outer wrist, press down to the floor. Notice how the block a little bit lengthens away from the elbows as we do that. Already the tendency for the elbows to start to splay out. Contain them towards the center of the mat. As you do that, the skin remains gripping on the yoga mat, but the arm bones there, we feel them just a little bit slide on the skin of the body in that direction, towards the skin of the inner arm. Raise up your pelvis. Now you're looking at the floor there between the forearms. Check that your head is completely off the floor. At no point will your head touch the block. Walk in, exhale, and kick up. Squeeze the block with the index finger bases. Wrists press down, lifting up through the shoulders. Buttocks up and away from the wall. Front thighs up and towards the wall. Calves up and away from the wall. Inner heels lift, big toe bases lift, and then release down. Aramukha Virasana, arms extend forwards, hips coming back and onto your heels. Okay, and then come up. So a few of the standing poses, we will include some shoulder opening variations within them. Left heel to the wall, right foot step out. Now you've got two blocks there. Potentially you may need to use both. Let's just establish first of all, rather than having the hand onto the shin, we'll bring the hand down to the block. We'll place the block beside the outer leg and try it as I've gone into it initially, and probably a good starting point for most people, having the block there on its tall end, and check the position of the top shoulder. Ensure that the top shoulder can sit vertically aligned over the bottom shoulder. If it's tipping forwards, we need to add more height. So you can always get that second block and boost the height of your block by placing it underneath the block that you're currently using. Equally, we can go down onto a side edge block a little closer to the floor, so long as the top shoulder can still stay back. Having the block on its side edge like that will help the whole of the hand to have a firm surface to press against. Important that the heel of the hand is able to make contact. So now that we've established what height our hand needs, we're going to be, for today, rotating the hand so that rather than the fingers pointing in the same direction as the front toes, the hand will be turned so that the fingers point back towards the wall behind. So a moment just to configure your block. Ensure that the hand is completely on the block, so we want to avoid the fingers, as we did earlier, curving around the edge of the block. Make sure that you're positioning the block so that the wrist, the right wrist, is directly under the right shoulder, the arm vertical, perpendicular to the floor. Firm contact with the right index finger base. The little finger sign of the wrist
turn it outwards, towards the center of the room, away from the wall that your heel is touching. Notice the rotation there on the biceps. The right biceps faces outwards, away from the wall, as your chest turns upwards towards the ceiling. So the little finger side of the wrist away from the wall, the back of the right shoulder, it moves back towards the wall. The chest turning up towards the ceiling. The left shoulder, it stays back. And we'll take the top arm up. Uttanasana, normally we have the palm facing forwards, but so that we can bring some symmetry to how the arms are working, let's turn the arm so that the thumb points back, a little bit like we would have the arm before we extend the arm over in Shavasana. So that the palm is facing away from the wall, the knuckles back towards the wall. And then that symmetry, the right arm and the left arm, the little finger side of the wrist move away from the wall. The backs of the shoulders towards the wall. The sternum bone, it moves towards the throat as we make that adjustment to the pose. And then keeping that nice symmetry in the chest, in the shoulders, then we'll just bring the top hand back as we more regularly have it, with the palm facing out and looking up towards the top thumb. Okay, and then inhale and come up, and we'll change sides. Ensure that the block is beside the outer leg. We'll come directly down to having the fingers turned back. For the moment, the right hand onto the hip. Check that the left wrist straight under the left shoulder. Left index finger base press into the block. Little finger side of the left wrist turn away from the wall. Whilst doing that, the shoulder socket of that left arm draw back into the body. Now right shoulder back, take the top arm up, and for today, turning the top arm so that the thumb points back, the little finger side of the wrist moves away from the wall, the thumb side of that wrist, it draws back towards the wall. Same turning in the bottom arm, the little finger side of the wrist away from the wall, same action in the shoulders, the backs of the shoulders moving away from the neck, sternum bone towards the throat. Keeping that rotation in the shoulders, just straighten the top hand up as we more regularly have it, the palm facing to the front and looking up towards the top thumb. And then release and come up. Parsvakonasana, we're going to be working with that same rotated hand. And just to ensure that, and often in Parsvakonasana we're bringing the fingertips to the floor, make sure that you're able to get the palm flat, make sure that the heel of the hand is able to make contact. Some of you might be able to do that on the floor. Probably more commonly we will need to use some height there. We can use a block on its side edge or a flat block. Make sure that now as you bend your right leg, checking your distance there between your feet, bringing the hand down onto the block, and then again just make sure that the top shoulder can come back and sit vertically over the bottom shoulder. If you need more height for the hand, then take it. It might be that you use your block on the tall end. Once you've established that height, turn the hand so that the fingers, as we just did in the previous pose, point back. Now there's a rotation in the wrist. The little finger side of the wrist turns away towards the center of the room. It's a rotation also felt in the upper arm. The outer biceps, it draws back towards the wall. The back of the shoulder towards the wall. We take the top arm up, and as we just did there in Uttanasana, turn the top arm. The thumb side of the wrist back towards the wall, little finger side of the wrist away from the wall. Now before we take the arm over, pressing the hand down into the block, lift the top elbow higher. Maintaining that length, then extend the arm over. The right biceps, it's turned out to the side. The right side of the chest, it turns up towards the ceiling, extending through to the fingertips of the top hand. And then inhale and come all the way up. And we'll change. A moment just to set your block up. Fingers turned back. Wrist directly under the shoulder. Again, just a reminder for those of you that tend to hyperextend the elbow, having the hand turned in this direction, it can emphasize that action, exaggerate that action, so just holding back from that. At no point are we aggressively pushing the elbow forwards. The area to focus on more, the shoulder socket, making sure that it's contained back into the body with the little finger side of the wrist turning towards the center of the room. Top arm take up, and then turn the top arm. Feel the symmetry in the arms, the little finger sides of the wrist away from the wall, the backs of the shoulders towards the wall. Pressing down with the left hand, lift the right elbow higher, maintaining that height through the right arm. Extend the arm over. Keep pressing into the right heel, and from the right waist, reach out, extend out into the fingertips. And then release and come up. Uttanasana. We'll take the blocks. Again, we can use the blocks either on their tall end or on their side edge, or flat, for those of you that are working with more mobility there. But let's work with a more concave spine version of the pose, so emphasizing looking forwards and across the room. Let's just establish what height the blocks need to be to achieve that first. And then once you've established that, the hands are turned so that the fingers, as we have been working, pointing directly back towards the wall behind. A moment just to stabilize the pose. Anchor the hips, the right outer hip up and back. But then the arm action and how it relates to the shoulders. Index finger bases squeeze down. Notice the heel of the hand, it tends to get light. Press it more firmly down on the little finger side. Little finger side of the wrist, it turns away from you. That rotation, it's felt in the biceps area. The inner biceps on the little finger side of the arm, it turns forwards and descends. The outer biceps on the thumb side of the arm here, it rotates back to the wall behind and lifts upwards. Chest moves forwards, but the shoulders, they stay back into the body. Concave back, in that shoulder blade region of the body, draw in as the chest moves forwards. Okay, and then we'll turn the hands back to face to the front, and we'll step the left foot forwards, right foot back, rotate the hands. Make sure that the heels of the hands can literally come to the block or the floor, pressing firmly the heels of the hands down. Emphasize the little finger side of the heel of the hand. Inner biceps lengthening downwards as they turn forwards. Outer biceps drawing up as they roll back towards the wall behind. Shoulder sockets contained back into the body, chest moving forwards. Okay, and then bring the hands back to face forwards, step forwards. Let's then gather our chair and we'll head in the direction of some chair back bends. And we'll work with our yoga mat folded in half and in half again and placed on the seat of the chair. Now I'm just going to switch mats because this mat that I have been using here is not so easily folded. So I'm just switching to a different yoga mat that I know does more easily fold. Now, some yoga chairs fine to use as they are, and this one potentially can be used as is. It's just got some cushioning there on the seat of the chair. Other yoga chairs tend to be more metal, so if that is the case, you will need some padding. If you are going to be putting padding, be it a blanket or whatever you have there, good if you put your yoga mat down first, so that when you're moving about on your chair, the blanket is not sliding with you. So the yoga mat folded like this, it adheres the support to the structure of the chair. And for me, I need to boost the height of the chair for chair back bends. So I'm using a shoulder pad here, one that is used for Shavasana. And if you think of the height of the stack that you might use in Shavasana, this is roughly equivalent to that, perhaps say 3 stacked blankets. I'm placing that over the seat of the chair. It may or may not be necessary. Often taller people, you need that bit of extra height. Shorter people, we might need some height under the heels. And we'll look at that more specifically in detail soon. Make sure that the edge of the seat of the chair is clearly felt. If you put a support on it, like I just have, make sure that it aligns literally with the edge of the seat of the chair. And then we'll be sitting through the chair. The first one of these will be keeping our legs bent. We'll then progressively work to straighten our legs. At that point, when we straighten our legs, we may need to put some height under the feet. We'll look at that when we get to it. This first one though, we can work with the feet to the floor. Our knees will be bent, so don't be too close to the wall. You'll need to allow now your hips to come further through the frame of the chair so that you can lie yourself back and the shoulder blades come just off the edge of the seat of the chair, so that the seat of the chair is pressing into the back ribs there, just below the shoulder blades. Below meaning the bit of the shoulder blade nearer the mid-back. Make sure that you've got your elbows on the seat of the chair initially. So for some people you'll need to tuck your elbows in quite tightly towards the sides of the torso in order to fit them onto the seat of the chair. Your hands at this stage are gripping the frame of the chair. Important that your knees are bent, your heels are to the floor, feet flat, and with the feet straight. Your feet are hip width distance apart. Initially, we're focusing on pressing our elbows down and coiling, containing the upper back into the body. It means that the elbows have a really clear, firm contact down with the seat of the chair, but there's a much lighter contact with the edge of the seat onto the upper back. Visibly, the sides of the chest are lifting, the whole chest is lifting. You're keeping your abdominal area relaxed. The throat is relaxed, the head hangs back. If there's discomfort in the neck, pinching in the neck, often that means that we just need to use the blocks as a support under the head. Maybe one of the blocks standing upright, potentially resting on a flat block underneath it in order to give the neck a little more support. For most people that won't be an issue, only if there is discomfort in the neck in this hanging position. Now, the assumption is that you have some experience with chair back bends, that you'll be relatively familiar with them, regularly practicing them. For that reason, we'll just stay that bit longer in this one. And now that the body has started to adjust and open more, rather than pressing the elbows into the seat of the chair, we'll just let the elbows come a bit wider and hang off the edge of the side of the chair, still just lightly gripping with the fingers to the frame of the chair. And we've gone now from the elbows pressing firmly to the elbows being more loose, and it allows the edge of the chair to give the upper back more of a firm adjustment. So allow that to be the case. Let the chair lift the back ribs there, lift the chest, and we're opening that region of the chest around where the collarbones are. Let the chair lift and open the chest. Keep your abdominal region relaxed. Navel releasing back down towards the spine. Okay, and then let's come up. We, as always, lead up with the chest, bringing the head up last. It may be that you need to bring a hand onto the seat of the chair behind the pelvis just to support the body as it comes upright. Coming up now. And then just sitting neutral position for a moment. This next one will be straightening our legs, and for shorter people, often at this point, the edge of the seat, the edge of the seat nearest the wall, it can tend to dig into the backs of the thighs and obstruct your ability to completely straighten your knees. If that is the case, as a last resort, try first without, but as a last resort, you may need to put some blocks against the wall so that your heels are just a little bit more elevated than onto the floor, and that's just going to free up the back of the thigh there so it's not pressing into the seat of the chair. For taller people, that won't be an issue. We will need to determine more exactly how far the chair needs to be away from the wall. Best way of doing that, to start a little too close to the wall, and that way you can press into the wall with your feet and slide your chair back away from the wall. If you're practicing on a surface where your chair cannot slide, your only option will be to come up as we're doing now and then manually move the chair position. If that is the case, it might take you a little longer to get your chair position. It might be necessary to pause the video rather than push ahead with the chair not being exactly where it needs to be. Okay, so let's come back to it. Hips through. Lying back, edge of the chair coming just under the shoulder blades, head hanging back. We'll revert back to having the elbows on the seat of the chair, lifting the chest up, and then we, with the feet, find the wall. The heels stay to the floor, the balls of the feet to the wall, and we're just pushing the chair back by pressing the feet into the wall so that we can get the legs to straighten. Make sure that the legs can completely straighten. So here's where I mean, if the seat of the chair is digging into the backs of your thighs and preventing you from completely straightening your knees, you will need to bring your feet a little higher up. Good if there's a support under the heels. Elbows press down, chest lift up. And then rather than gripping the frame of the chair with the hands, clutching it, we'll point the fingers upwards towards the ceiling and pressing the palms of the hands against the frame. So that the chest is lifting and moving towards the throat. Your shoulders are drawing back away from the ears. Shoulder blades tucked under the spine, between the shoulder blades, lifting up. Now, we can assess at this point if we're able to remove the hands from the frame of the chair without the chest dropping. If you're dependent on the hands for keeping the lift in your chest, it may be better at this stage just to consolidate that action of having your hands to the frame of the chair. Otherwise, so let's start to bring the arms over. For today, we'll have the palms facing upwards towards the ceiling. So the knuckles are facing the floor, the palms the ceiling. We'll work to keep the fingers a little bit up and off the floor. So elbows straight. The side ribs, the armpits, the biceps, the palms of the hand, moving outwards away from the body. Keeping the elbows straight. Again, we're just lightly gripping the triceps muscle. That alone just helps the shoulder sockets to sit back into the body, away from the ears. Reaching out into the fingertips. Ensure that the thighs are pressing down, the knees straight, and that helps the chair to lift your chest up. And then hands back to the frame of the chair. Bend your knees, lead up with the chest, bring your head up last. Sitting neutral for a moment. Just make sure that you can see the screen at this point, we'll be crossing our arms, and we can do it a number of ways, but important that when we cross the arms, the hands are holding the biceps, the little finger is in the crease of the elbow, so that we cross our arms this way. And then important because we can then with our hands press down into that elbow crease, moving the elbow joint away from the shoulder socket. We're going to be working with this arm fold and then bringing the arms over the head. If you look at me, the arms, of course, they don't fit over the arms, for most people anyway, in this position. It just means that when we get to that point, we briefly need to retract the neck. Once the arms come over, then we can let the neck re-lengthen. And we'll be letting the back of the head rest onto the wrists in this position. I'll describe it as we go. Make sure your chair has retained its position. We'll be straightening the legs. So hips through, lying back, feet to the wall. So now we're folding the arms with the outer edges of the hands pressing into the elbow crease. We press the hands into the elbow crease. As the arms come over, the back of the skull there is resting on that region where the forearm joins the wrist. Make sure that your throat can completely relax. Make sure you're not lifting your head with your arms, that your arms relax. With the hands though pressing out into that elbow crease, thighs press down, feet press into the wall, allowing the chair to lift and open your chest. Okay, and then release the fold of the arms, bring the hands back to the frame of the chair, and then sitting upright. Now it can be quite a different effect for the shoulders, which direction that we cross the arms, the direction that we fold the arms. So let's make sure that we do the opposite one there. So I started with my right hand holding my left biceps, and then this one I'll hold the right biceps with my left hand, and I'll be tucking the back of the right hand under the left biceps. So make sure that you're clear on how to fold the arms in the opposite way. Good if you work that out here in the upright position rather than trying to fiddle with it once you're back in the back bend. And then let's go, hips through for the second side, lying back. And then folding the arms. Bringing the arms over, making sure that the arms can support the back of the skull, and let the head rest into the arms, the throat relaxed. But they're not lifting the head with the arms. Let the arms release towards the floor. Just that outward movement, the hands pressing into the elbow creases, the shoulder sockets drawing away from the ears. Thighs press down, your chest lifts up, and then release. Hands back to the frame of the chair and sitting upright. Okay, and then let's come out of the chair. Now, we're going to be working progressively now towards viparita, dandasana. The first one of these we'll do with our feet up the wall, so that seen from the side, our legs will be parallel with the floor. The distance of the chair away from the wall, it does need to be quite exact, and it will more or less be slightly different from person to person, depending on body proportion, but a good starting point, one that will help to get you more or less in the right spot straight away, will be if we, first of all, common here in terms of getting our shoulder position to need to boost our height a little bit. So I've got this here already, the support, the shoulder support, it's roughly a 3-fold blanket in height. If you are using the extra height, to all the people I would definitely suggest that you do, make sure that the support that you're using is level, flush to the seat of the chair. And then we're going to measure using our legs, as we did earlier, feet to the wall. And if we bring the seat of the chair level to the back of the pelvis, that will be a good starting point. For some people you'll need to move the chair closer, for other people a little bit further out. If you have a hard floor surface, we're going to be placing our head down here. It might pay to have an additional yoga mat there, both for grip for your hands, also a little bit of cushioning for the head. We wouldn't want to be bringing the head down onto a concrete surface, for instance. To get into the pose, and maybe good if we just watch me come into it first of all. So we're sitting through the chair, we bring our hips through the chair, we start to lie back before we let our head hang back, so I'm looking towards the wall. At this point I bring my feet up the wall, my ankles roughly hip height, so that the legs will eventually be parallel with the floor. We then need to make sure that we can straighten our legs and slide back without the chair moving. Now you can see my head can get to the floor. The edge of the chair, it's come a little bit beyond the sacrum, comfortably into the small of my back. It's not in any way pressing uncomfortably up into my spine. So heads to the floor, I can still keep my hands here to the frame of the chair. That ensures that my chest is open. We'll then come to here, the 3-point head balance position. We won't rush through this, I'm just demonstrating quickly here. And then one hand at a time, interlocking the hands behind the back of the skull, making sure that the shoulders are lifting. When it's time to come out of the pose, and good to see it, so we're quite far back, so we often will need to just wriggle a little bit onto the seat of the chair first, and then come up. Notice how I brought the hand back behind the sacrum. So let's try that. Make sure that you've measured your distance. You've got the edge of the chair a leg's length distance away from the wall. And what I'm going off there is when we're sitting upright in dandasana, the distance from the wall to the back of your pelvis. And then we're sitting through the chair. We bring our hips further through. Now initially we're lying back as we have been for the previous poses, letting the shoulder blades come off the edge. Rather than letting the head hang, we look back to where the feet will be on the wall. We bring both feet up the wall, and then with your hands you can just hold any blankets in position as you slide back, bringing the head to the floor. I'm giving you a moment to just find that position. If your head doesn't reach the floor, it means that your chair is too far away from the wall. And if you need to, you just come out of the pose. It might be that you even pause the video if that is the point, if that is the case, so that you can ensure that your chair is correctly positioned. And once the head is to the floor, making sure that you're not collapsing into the head, keeping your shoulders lifting, your chest lifting. And then we bring the hands to 3-point head balance. So the wrists are shoulder width, the elbows are bent, the forearms perpendicular to the floor. I've already looked at a very similar movement earlier in the class. Here it's the thumb side of the wrist. Turn it away from the face and press down the heel of the hand on that side. So heels of the hands press down, resist your elbows back towards your shoulders, lift your shoulders upwards away from the floor. Notice how that helps the shoulder blades to lift away from the neck. And then keeping the shoulder blades lifting away from the neck, we can, one hand at a time, interlock the fingers behind the back of the skull. Common for the elbows to lift, common for the elbows to splay out wider than the shoulders. So contain the elbows into shoulder width
Once they've been contained to shoulder width, see then if the elbows can press down to the floor. And for some people, it may not be possible to get the elbows to come all the way to the floor. Elbows pressing down helps the shoulders to lift up. And then to come out of the pose, we release the interlock, bringing the hands back to the frame of the chair. We bend our knees, and as I did earlier, it may be necessary just to shuffle the hips onto the seat of the chair a little, and then we're sitting upright. This next one, we will go to the next stage of keeping our feet to the floor and bringing our head back to, as we just did there, to the floor. As soon as we start to keep our feet to the floor rather than have them up the wall, it then makes it harder for shorter stature people to keep a balanced pose. For their head to reach the floor, often it means then their feet need to lift up. Something that is helpful there is not so getting so caught up with where the head is, where the feet are, but going off more the position of the navel. In a well-balanced pose, the navel will be facing directly upwards towards the ceiling, and if you're a shorter person, often then you will feel that the navel is being tilted outwards and away in towards the center of the room. So often the best way of dealing with this, troubleshooting, is to first of all put a support under your head. And it might be this support that I'm sitting on here. A shoulder pad works really well, 2 of them, ready for the head and the hands to come onto. And commonly in yoga studios, it's a stack of yoga mats, 3 to 4 yoga mats. Blankets, less ideal only because they're not as grippy for the hands and they tend to not stay in position and get folded up. Once you've got support for the head, if still the heels are coming off the floor, then you put blocks down for your feet, and when the pose is balanced, the navel is eventually facing upwards. Rather than me demonstrating how to come into the pose, let's all go into it at the same time, and I'll describe the steps clearly as we go. So let's not rush to get the head down. First of all, hips through the chair, shoulder blades off the edge of the chair, elbows onto the seat and the head hanging back. So at this point, we're coiling the back ribs up, and it brings the back of the skull a little closer into the chair. We want to maintain that as we just slide a little bit further over, keeping the head into the chair until the head comes down to the floor. And then once the head has come down, we bring the hands down to the floor into the 3-point head balance position. Make sure that your feet have remained hip width. Check that the feet are straight. Pressing the heels of your hands down, lift your shoulders up. And then those of you that are going to the next step, you're assessing whether you're going to the next step on whether or not you are able to keep that lift in your shoulders, preventing your neck from compressing. And then one hand at a time, bringing the fingers interlocked behind the back of the skull. And again, containing the elbows in, then pressing them down in order to lift the shoulders. Lift the backs of the shoulders. Keep your outer armpits wrapping forwards in the direction that you're facing. Where the upper arm bones join the shoulders here, we're actively resisting away from the wall and into the space there in front of your face. To come out of the pose, release the interlock, bring your hands back to the frame of the chair, leading up with the chest, and then bringing your head up last. Let's then work with one more of the chair back bends, and we'll stay still with the viparita, dandasana. This time we'll be elevating our feet using the chair, and this one important that you have some good grip both for your chair and for your head and your hands. So I'm just going to remove the additional yoga mat that I brought in. I'll bring my original mat back up against the wall.
the chair without any supports, important. So if you've had blankets on it, if you've had yoga mats on it, remove them now so that you just have a straight yoga chair. And I think I'm good if I just quickly demonstrate this one. The entry into it, it is relatively awkward relative to other yoga poses. The awkward aspect to it, and it's not such a problem, but is just having the legs straddling either side of the chair, making sure that we can hold with the hands the front legs of the chair. Notice how close my pelvis is to the chair to do it. And then as soon as we bring our feet up onto the seat of the chair, it no longer has that quality of awkwardness. And we can then, pressing the feet down, lift hips up. Once the feet are securely on the seat of the chair, the hands come to the shoulders with the elbows pointing up. Now I'm pressing down with my hands and sliding onto the top of the head. The head has the, like in a headstand, it has that ability to support and lift the body up. So I'm making sure that the shoulders here are lifting. Then one hand at a time into the interlock position, keeping the back of the pelvis lifting upwards, keeping the shoulders lifting upwards. And then when it's time to come down, we just reverse how we got up. Hands back to 3-point. The head stays to the floor. I'm just pressing my hands down, sliding my head away from the floor and releasing the hips back down to the floor. So let's try it. So coming into position, feet either side of the chair. Get in nice and close to the chair. Important that with both hands you're able to grip the front legs of the chair. So you're straddling at this stage, leg either side of the chair, and then we bring our feet up onto the seat. Don't expect that when you lift your hips up you'll be able to press initially the soles of the feet down. It's just the heel at this point that is able to press down. As we pressing the heels down, lift our hips up. Tuck the shoulders under. Before you go any further, assess that the feet have secure pressure down onto the seat of the chair. And then hands under the shoulders, elbows pointing up, fingers are pointing back towards the chair. And then pressing the hands down, we slide the head towards the chair and stop on the top of the head. Pausing there, keeping the shoulders lifting up and off the ears. Hands press down, back of the pelvis lift up. When we lift the pelvis, we lift the spine and we lift the shoulders. And then one hand at a time into the interlock position behind the back of the skull. Pressing the forearms down, lift your shoulders up. As we did earlier, that slight containing of the elbows towards the center of the yoga mat in order to lift more effectively up through the shoulders. Pressing your feet down, lift your pelvis. And then to come out of the pose, return your hands back to the 3-point position. Pressing your hands down, slide your head away from the chair and then lower your pelvis back down to the floor. And then we'll roll to the side and come up. Let's release our back now in mayurasana. So come to sit in the chair, bring your hips far back in the chair, and then reaching forwards, bringing your shoulders in between your knees. If your back is feeling ready to let go, folding the arms, letting the head hang, either staying at that point or then reaching through the legs of the chair to hold the back legs of the chair. I've got a crossbar there on my chair that I can hold. And then lifting the head and looking across the room, keeping your hips anchored, keeping the sitting bones anchored. Squeeze your knees against your shoulders.
resist your shoulders back against your knees. Okay, and then release and come all the way up. Let's lie out for Shavasana. We'll use the chair today as a support for our calves, and I find that we'll just need to move a little bit away from the wall with the chair, otherwise the feet can be distractingly in contact with the wall. So just a little bit of a gap there with the chair away from the wall, and then calves resting onto the seat of the chair. Blanket for the head. Arms comfortably out by the sides. I'll give you a moment just to find the pose. Make sure that you're keeping yourself warm. If you need extra blankets to cover yourself, then do so. With the legs in this position, that region where the spine joins into the pelvis, it sits closer to the floor, potentially even literally in contact with the floor. It entails a slight tilting of the pelvis in a good way, in a comfortable way, by relaxing quite naturally the pubic bone. It sits towards the navel. And that ensures just a nice comfortable length up and down the back waist region. There's also a nice broadness across that area. The muscles either side of the spine broadening. As you exhale, the skin either side of the navel broadening. Make sure that your upper arm bones are descending, releasing to the floor. From the elbow joint to the shoulder joint, the upper arm bones releasing down. During inhalation, the side ribs gently spreading, but without disturbing the upper arms. Ensure that the muscles at the back of the neck have completely released and let go. Jaw muscles relax, the tongue quite naturally feels more shrunken in the mouth, withdrawing back from the teeth. In a similar way, the eyes, sitting back into the eye sockets and withdrawing away from the bridge of the nose as they release. Smooth, soft inhalation, smooth, soft exhalation. Okay, and then a couple of slightly deeper in-breaths. From there we'll bend your knees into your chest, eyes open, and then roll to the side. And as you're ready, come up. Thank you for practicing with Yoga Selection.